stepping up its fight against money laundering. President Medvedev has just signed a law bringing Russian banking legislation right into line with recommendations made by the Financial Action Task Force, also known as the FATF. FATF is an intergovernmental body combating money laundering and terrorist financing.
Let's talk now to one of our correspondents. Ivor Bennett's joining us live. Ivor, it's good to see you. Please tell me, what are the changes in the law?
Well, there are two main changes, really. The first one is all about the banks and the financial institutions being more strict on themselves and policing themselves, really, because from now on they won't be allowed to reveal any information to their clients on how they go about preventing money laundering and the measures they take. And the second change is all about a closer monitoring of any transaction involving a party from a country that doesn't comply with the recommendations set by the FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, have sort of drawn up a blacklist, if you like, of the countries that don't comply with their standards and recommendations. So if there's any individual, party or financial institution that is wanting to do a transaction with a company here in Russia, well, from now on it'll have to provide a name, an address and a registration of the financial institution involved to make sure everything's above board. If it's not, well, then the transaction won't go through. So it's all about stricter controls, more stringent policing of financial transactions, and as well as punishments that are already in the legislation, warnings will now be introduced if anyone breaches these regulations.
And Ivor, I mean, how big a problem is money laundering in Russia that it was felt that these changes were needed?
Well, prior to this, the legislation in Russia wasn't actually up to speed with the standards set by the FATF, despite Russia actually being a member of that body from 2003. And the reason why it's taken this long for the legislation to be brought up to speed and completely meet all the recommendations is because prior to 2003, it was actually on that blacklist of countries to be wary of doing transactions with businesses from. And in total, the Financial Action Task Force has 40 recommendations for legislation on how to prevent money laundering and 9 recommendations on how to police financial terrorism and how to prevent that. So it's a lot of changes to the legislation, a huge overhaul. It's taken a long time to Russia to reach that point, but now it has been signed into law by President Medvedev. It'll take 180 days before it comes into practice, and as well as applying to Russian banks and financial institutions here, it'll also apply to foreign banks that have their branches here as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That's our correspondent Ivor Bennett talking to us about some changes in the law. To discuss this, we're joined by Daniel Klein from the Hellevik, Klein and Orsuf. Thanks so much for being with us, Daniel.
Well, Anya and Neil, thank you very much again for inviting me on the program.
It's always a pleasure. Okay, well, let's talk about this story first. Just generally, how bad is the money laundering situation here in Russia?
Actually, surprisingly, it's quite bad. And the reason I say surprisingly is that taxes in Russia are some of the lowest in the world. Income taxes are a flat 13%. And actually, as a foreigner, you don't have to pay Social Security tax anymore. For companies, profit taxes used to be 24%, and now they're 20%. So the fact that there's still a lot of money laundering is actually quite surprising.
Okay, what do you think that Russia has to gain from this if they sign up to these recommendations?
Well, I think that actually it will be effective in reducing some of the money laundering that exists in Russia, and especially outside of Russia. But to be quite honest with you, there always will be money laundering in Russia. There always will be money laundering in every country. It's impossible to completely eradicate it, but it is possible to reduce it.
So if we talk about this organization, the FATF, back in 2000, 2002, Russia was actually on their blacklist. Is anything changing? Is Russia getting better at monitoring money laundering or even fighting it at all?
Actually, to be quite honest, I think that the situation has changed dramatically in the last 8 or 10 years. I know that because I have some shares in a company which does audit and also outsource accounting. And back 7 or 8 years ago, almost all companies, or a lot of companies, even foreign companies that had subsidiaries in Russia, had an operation where they had these so-called white and gray books. In other words, part of their accounts were official, and all the transfers were official, and part of their accounts were actually done on a cash basis, which is basically money laundering that was illegal. And today, we're seeing very, very few companies, whether they be pure Russian companies or whether they be foreign companies with Russian subsidiaries or rep offices in Russia, they're operating under this scheme. So I think that definitely that fewer and fewer companies are laundering money today.
Do you think this is something that's going to be easy to enforce? You're relying on banks from obeying these regulations, these orders, not notifying their clients. People aren't that trusting in a lot of banks anyway, and you're putting a lot of faith in the banks almost policing themselves. Is it going to be easy to do?
I think that the banks will have to comply in most instances, because the banks don't want to have a situation where they have some sort of criminal liability or where they have some to pay some fines. So I think
it's high risk.
It certainly is high risk, and whether the banks want to not comply with the law, well, I think you're going to find few banks that will.
Are we talking considerable punishments usually when it comes to these kind of circumstances?
The punishment is significant enough to act as a significant deterrence to the banks. Yes.
Okay, thanks so much for joining us and talking to us tonight, Daniel Klein from Hellevik Klein and Ossoff. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure as well. Thank you very much.